Hi, my name is Carrie Moore. I'm with ISDM, and I'm here interviewing Tom Amoroso with Andropogon, who was recently the 2014 ASLA award winner with the project Shoemaker Green in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was just talking with Tom before we started recording, and he's actually known that they were winning the award for a little bit. And so that must have been incredibly difficult keeping that secret for a while.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but yeah, we kept the promise, so I don't think we've leaked it too much outside of our families.
So Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the basics behind Shoemaker's Green? So how you got involved and what you were brought into the project with.
Sure. So the RFP came out in late 2009 from the University of Pennsylvania Facilities Group. It was for just about a 3-acre parcel of land that affronts the athletic precinct of the university. Penn had just recently completed a larger master plan called the Penn Connects plan, which is basically the Penn's campus expansion eastward towards the city of Philadelphia and the river. Previously, they had been moving west and acquiring parts of the neighborhood that they abut. But Dr. Amy Gutman was a big integral part of this movement to sort of stop and refocus towards the river. There was a lot of abandoned, derelict land down there, and to make a stronger connection to the river and to the city. So Shoemaker was one of the largest remaining open space project after the Penn Park project that Michael Van Valkenburg was underway actually when the RFP went out. So we had a pretty hefty competition for the project. Luckily, we were selected. The charge from the university basically was to create an open space that had, and this is quote, the DNA of College Green. College Green is the historic core of Penn's campus that was revitalized in the early 70s. Ironically, our founding principals, Carol and Colin, Franklin, were a part of that, along with Laurie Olin and Bob Hanna and some others at Penn. And so every generation, it seemed, our firm from the 70s on had a pretty significant project at Penn. That being the first. Then we did the college, the freshman quad, which was a big project at Penn back in the late 80s. Some of the stuff on Market Street. And so this was sort of our next generation's chance to make their mark at Penn and continue on the tradition. The project itself, as I said, was to replicate College Green, but also become the gateway that transitioned the historic fabric of the campus, which is very traditional and has a pretty stringent set of design guidelines that outlay the materials of the landscape. And so while the architecture is allowed to celebrate the architecture of the current period, the landscape is sort of that unifying element that holds it together. But we did have a unique opportunity because we were sort of bridging the gap between the historic campus and then the new, more modern elements of the campus of Penn Park, basically. So to get to Penn Park from Penn's historic campus, you have to cross Shoemaker Green and then go over the bridge into the park. And so we had a little bit of leeway on how to do a modern interpretation of their materials. And so it was a lot of fun. The project, though, was basically a passive open space that had to accommodate, the day-to-day use, which has a significant portion of students that come across the street at 33rd Street, which is on the western boundary of the property, that go to the David Rittenhouse Laboratories building, which is where the core sciences are taken. So every few hours, we have hundreds of students that stream in and out of the building. In addition, two of Penn's most iconic historic buildings are also affront the site. One is the Palestra Fieldhouse, which is where the basketball team plays, and then Franklin Field, which is their stadium to the south. Franklin Field also hosts the Penn Relays every year, which is the largest track and field event in the country. So we have everyone from grade schools up into the professional runners. It starts on Thursdays and ends on Sunday for 1 week a year. So this site had to really accommodate a very varying size of the, a few hundred students day to day to thousands at these larger events like the relays and graduation and convocation.
So essentially, Shoemaker Green provides the connection between Penn Park and College Green. And historically, the Shoemaker Green has been a tennis court, correct?
The previous site was several tennis courts. When Palestra was built, it was filled approximately 10 or 15 feet up from the current elevation of the street. And so the courts were on the same elevation as the street, and then you had the entrance to the building, to Palestra, all the buildings on the east about 10 to 12 feet higher in elevation. And there was a very narrow concrete walkway on the north side of the project, and then a service road on the south side of the project, and that was the only way to get around these tennis courts. There was a sort of a stand of existing London plane trees at the top at the east that we decided to keep intact. Just maturity, they really framed some of the buildings. We had to remove a few to allow for some of the new pathways to be implemented. But yeah, this was really an underutilized sort of back of house area for the university. And it was something that has long been, I guess, voiced within the University of Penn community for better identity for the athletic precincts in some of their most prized buildings. And so this was a wonderful opportunity. The Penn Park project was really a consolidation of all the athletic facilities on the campus to one location. And so once Penn Park became active, the new tennis courts allowed us then to begin construction on the demolition of what was at the Shoemaker Green site.
So while Shoemaker Green, you did demolition and you removed portions of some of the impervious pavement, you did keep portions of the tennis courts.
Correct. So during, I guess it was late design development, early construction documentation, when we started to do some of our test borings, we knew we were dealing with some old row home basements that originally, back at the turn of the century, were located on the site. In the percolation test results, we had some test locations that took a few inches an hour, others that took thousands of gallons an hour. It was just it wouldn't stop. So we were like, where is this water going? So we decided, our team, we had a firm here that we've worked with for a long time, Melior Engineering was on the team. And we decided to, based on these testing results, that it would really be a very unstable condition subsurfacely if we were to remove the tennis courts and now introduce water that hasn't been introduced for almost 100 years. The other issue is there's a buried stream directly below the site that's channelized and piped. So we knew infiltration really wasn't the best option here on this site. And so that sort of changed our approach from an infiltration-based system to a capture and reuse system. So effectively, the entire project is a green roof, if you want to look at it that way. We left a portion of the tennis courts in place. That's really the bottom of our storage basin, one of the storage basins. And so the courts, we left those in place and decided to sort of change our approach on the stormwater management design.
Now, in general, I think sometimes the term rain garden sort of seems to get the response that it's inconsequential, whereas the term green roof seems to have a better paradigm associated with it. And so from the green roof and rain garden, you're actually capturing 90% of the water. Is that right?
About 90% of the site.
Yeah.
So the site also, it sits at a low point in the watershed, the sewer shed of the city. And so flooding was always a problem at the street location where on 33rd Street at the southern end. So the big rain events where we had this combined CSO line out to the Schuylkill River, which is a few miles to the east of this site. So we knew we were always dealing with a water problem, and that coupled with the stream, it makes sense, right? The groundwater is still functioning as groundwater below all these buildings. So when we have a lot of water coming into the system, and then you add in all of the impervious cover that's coming in now from all the, from the city, from the buildings and the sidewalks and the streets, it's a lot of water to deal with. And so right away we knew that we had a lot of capacity to deal with a lot more water than what our project was generating. So the initial concepts you may see on the issue brochure, there's some diagrams that show all the building roofs that are adjacent to the project site, spilling into the site. And so we had the capacity to take on all those roofs, which are pretty significant roof areas. But once we got into it, most of those buildings, they are so old that they're internalized through the structural column of the buildings, and they drain inward down, get combined with the sanitary system, and come out at a much deeper elevation. So we couldn't capture all of the roofs, but we still had this enormous capacity to deal with extra water. And so, the courts, there's sort of three approaches to three pieces to the stormwater system. One is the tennis courts, which you mentioned. That's a pretty significant storage bed. Again, we knew we were filling in a fill condition with the stormwater design, and so as I said, those courts are several feet below the finished floor elevation of the buildings to the east, and so we knew we were always going to be in a fill condition. So we have all that volume now to deal with stormwater below the actual lawn area of the green. That water then is under-drained through an under-drainage system and conveyed to a 20,000-gallon cistern that takes all the water through the soils, that perks through the soils, through the stone bed above the tennis court, and then is wicked up and conveyed to the cistern. The other half of the site drains to the rain garden at it's on the northwest corner, and that's all surface water that is collected through a series of open trench drains that have open ends that spill into the rain garden. The water then runs through the plant vegetated swales and designed soils, and all of the soils on the site are sand-based soils. That was on purpose. One is that we knew we had to deal with a lot of use, so they could take compaction really well and not compact the soils. But they also act as a great filter, right? The sand filter, if you will, for the water. So the water is always running through these minimum of 3 feet of designed sand-based soils, and so whatever the plants aren't using or the soils aren't storing, that water is then collected and put into the cistern for reuse as irrigation. Subsequently, there was a renovation of the pavilion to the east that allowed us to pick up some of the roof and, more importantly, the AC condensate. So in the summer, when we need to water, we have a significant amount of water coming now from the buildings into our site. So we have all these multi means of pulling water that's non-potable into the project for use.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed to see that you had thought to that level of detail of catching the AC conduit, water that essentially is of a pretty decent quality water. I think that's a level of detail that a lot of people miss in design.
Just about there on every project. It's such a it's a no-brainer really. If you think about it, it's relatively clean water. I mean, it does have to be treated mechanically and through a UV sterilizer, but it's a pretty low low-tech solution that hangs on the wall. It's not, it doesn't take up more than like 3 square feet of area on the wall. The water's just run through that, and then it's released into the soil out in the main green, and then perks down like the rest of the stormwater. And like I said, it's a great resource for our makeup for what's not used on the site, captured on the site.
And that's a great way of looking at it in a holistic perspective. You're going to be running your AC during the summer, and so essentially then the times when you're going to be needing the most amount of water, you're capturing all of that potential water to help irrigate for the times that you would need it the most. So one of the other things that I find really unique about this project is that you had integrated research that was put within the project. So how exactly did you get involved with the integrated research, and have you had any results thus far?
Yes, actually. So the project was a pilot project for the Sustainable Sites Initiative. So we had 3 projects that were selected as a pilot project. So we knew right away that we were going to sort of tack on this very high benchmark for site performance. And so as part of the requirements for sites, we went after the monitoring credits at the end in the guidelines, in the design guidelines. Back in late 2009, 2010, we launched our integrated research department, which is headed by Emily McCoy of our office. And this was really our first project that allowed us to really divert some great resources to the monitoring. And so Emily and her group co-wrote a grant for application to get the monitoring equipment. More importantly, we teamed up with the university's environmental sciences department, and so now this is embedded in their curriculum. And so every year there's a grad student that's given the project, and we have some folks here, that Emily and some others, that go down and periodically they check all the equipment, they check all the data logs, and then start to publish the results. So we're coming up on 2 years now of data. The results have shown that not a drop has left the site, which is pretty great. We didn't expect that, because actually in the winter we have, because of the de-icing salts the university uses on the campus, we didn't want to contaminate the cistern and have to flush 20,000 gallons of water out each spring and start over. We have a manifold that just shuts off when they winterize the irrigation system. So that water all bypasses the cistern and goes right to the sewer. But not much has been leaving the site, as I said. Actually, nothing has left the site. And we've been dealing with this included some big storms these past couple of years. I think that really speaks to, and we're monitoring the, we look at stormwater quantity and quality. So we have sample grabs that before it goes through the vegetated systems, the soils and the plants. We have after it runs through the systems, we're able to look at the two and see the difference in the water quality. We look at the soils, physical and chemical properties. So we're very interested in the biology of the soils, and specifically with the sand-based soils. These are relatively sterile soils for the most part, and then the top 9 inches is the organic. And so once that burns off, it's really important that we monitor the levels to make sure that as the root zones develop and it starts to build up that organic layer, we got to make sure we supplement that with compost teas and some other management, sustainable management practices. The other thing we look at is the transpiration rates of the plant material. And no surprise, the native floodplain species are really performing well. I mean, we're only talking 4.5 to 5 inch caliper trees here, but some of the floodplain species like the oaks and the Nyssa sylvatica, some of the magnolia, they're putting up almost 20 gallons a day of transpiration, which you start to extrapolate that over once a tree is 24 inches in caliper size. It does a lot of work. Even the lawn, surprisingly, was burning off a lot of water, and so the site-based systems really do a significant portion of work, and just they need to be better understood and adapted into building codes.
And all of that transpiration's going to be affecting the microclimate of the area and really reducing the heat island effect that would be happening within that area.
Absolutely, and you start to see some of the we're starting to see warblers, which weren't really noticed in the city before, that migratory bird that are starting to show up, and different kinds, toads and different kinds of insects. And so it's really nice to see these things all come together, because they're all related. The bees, and it's really great. And then the social aspect too is very important. So we're also looking at the sort of behavior mapping on how people are using the site throughout the day and different times of the year. We have benches that were designed to really maximize the solar gain of the one end of the site. And so in the summer, when it's the hottest, it sits underneath a bosque of oak trees. But then once the trees lose their leaves in the wintertime, it's still a great place to sit, because now you get that direct sunlight, in the colder months. And so it's fun watching sort of the uses sort of migrate seasonally throughout the site.
I'm not sure if you've seen the project for public spaces, but what they're doing is sort of working off of some work that William White had done, where they're actually taking videos that were pointed in directions of public parks and other places designed by landscape architects that have been pointing at these areas, sometimes inadvertently. And so they're doing behavior analysis using time-lapse photography and looking over extended periods of time, like 10, 20 years. And there's really some amazing videos on YouTube about it that really show how the transformation of the sites has changed as time has evolved. And they show some areas that are, very popular and where the design is doing great things, and other areas where maybe they were initially, really amazing design areas, but over time, they have sometimes become dead zones.
Yeah, I think that's it. We've seen a couple of those, and it's very important to understand how, the programming of a site in the early design phase is really critical to try to best to avoid the sort of dead zones, I guess, for lack of a better word. And so on Shoemaker, the circulation really was the driver of the sort of framework of the design. We had the extension of Smith Walk, which is the straight path along the south that connects the historic campus to Paley Bridge. So that's the primary walkway. So we knew that was sort of one of the main drivers of the RFP from the university. The sort of curved swoop path is the main, the secondary pathway that comes from the northwest corner and then swings across the top of the site. That is picking up the future college houses that are currently under construction, a block up from the Shoemaker site. So we knew we would have a big migration of students from the north across our site again to get up to Paley Bridge over to Penn Park. And then everything else was about connecting to the doors. We have several buildings that front the site, and they're at different elevations. So it really, circulation is just connecting the dots at first, and then slowly massaging the form a little bit from a design standpoint for aesthetics. But I think back to basics really on design there is make it work, and then start to layer in some of the design elements for the interest.
So within the site, you have as well some seating that's granite seating with black locust inlaid, right? As well as the site has really a wide variety of potential uses. I know originally there was discussion that it might be used for some graduations. What exactly has occurred so far on the site?
So one of the other things that we proposed to the university during the early design phase, basketball and football are two of the university's biggest sports that are televised nationally. So during basketball season specifically, they would, for 4 or 5 games a year, pull these 18-wheeler satellite trucks up to the building, and so a little bit of a conflict with the pedestrian circulation through the site. And you can imagine that when the tennis courts were in place, the site was completely cut off now.
Right.
So one of the things we proposed was to put in some infrastructure that connected the building, power and cable and telecom, pulled that all down to the street. It's in a subsurface vault system where the trucks now just pull up on the side of the road on the shoulder of 33rd Street along the west edge of the site. They run their cables right to the vault. They plug right in. So the site is still completely open now, and the trucks are pulled off. And so that was one way to improve the sort of the vehicular pedestrian conflicts that they occurred throughout the year sometimes during the sporting events. There was nowhere to really gather for the homecoming games and stuff like that for the events inside the Franklin Field. And as I said, the track and field event for the Penn Relays, you have thousands of people each day there coming from the different schools. There was really nowhere to go. You're on the grid of the city. This really gives them this sort of outdoor area directly adjacent to these buildings to have their pre-function events. It gives them a lot of flexibility. The infrastructure also allows now for outdoor concerts and movie events, which they've had. Because the ability now, right behind, there's a war memorial that had to be left in place on 33rd Street. That's sort of that one picture you had shown with the crosswalk. Right behind that, we sort of have this wedge plaza piece that opens up a little bit where the retaining wall that's holding the main lawn really acts as sort of the front of the stage. And so they're able to just set up a stage in that area. The gentle slope of the lawn, which is like a 3% slope, allows people to just sit on the lawn facing the street, where they put up the inflatable screen or set up the stage for the band. And so yeah, it's really given them a lot of lot of use that they don't currently have on the campus.
That's great. Yeah, between the location and the flexibility of uses, it really seems that like, the site can essentially kind of become a hub.
And it has a variety of spaces to where you can have an outdoor classroom occupying one corner of the site, but people walking through in larger groups are not going to disrupt that. It has the capacity to absorb a lot of different users at the same time. I think that's the other important thing in public design is I don't know, the human nature is to always migrate to the edges, so nobody wants to sit in the middle of the lawn by themselves, but when you're with 2 or 3 or 4, it's funny to watch how people sort of, they sit off to the edge and sort of people watch, but then the larger groups, if you want to throw a frisbee or you have a larger group, you feel more comfortable sort of in that center space of the lawn.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really noticed when looking at the planting of the design is that, I think the natural inclination is, for most landscape architects to ring, essentially the area with trees, but people do exactly what you're saying is where they really feel uncomfortable sometimes if they're just by themselves being in the middle of an area. And so one of the things that I really liked was that you don't have just a ring around the site. There is a little bit of variety, and some of the trees go a little bit more in and out, and so it provides again another variety of spaces, and it gets people a little bit closer to the inside without feeling like they're just out there in the middle of an open football field.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also it provides shade in the summer when it's warmer, so you could sit underneath the trees on the lawn. So yeah, I think the planting was pretty simple in the fact that it's really just a shade lawn typology, just shade trees and lawn. But on the edges, we have a much more robust layered landscape, all native plant material to the region. The rain garden obviously has a lot more different plant species in it, but all purposely, put where where it was needed for whether aesthetics, performance, or both.
Great. Well, going back to the integrated research, is there anything that isn't necessarily going as you planned or isn't working as effectively as you intended or thought that it would?
I think there's a few plant species that haven't performed as well as we had hoped, and so we're sort of monitoring that over. I think this will be the 4th year coming up. We'll take a look and see if that's stabilized or if we need to make a switch there, and that's always a great with we don't really get in our profession this sort of post-occupancy conversation stayed involved with, unfortunately, and so it's great to have the opportunity to talk. I could pick up the phone and speak with the head of the grounds there that's running the Penn Park and Shoemaker, and talk through him about what he's seeing and what looks great, what doesn't look so hot, and then we could figure out how to sort of intervene quickly and remedy whatever the issue may be. Aside from that, I think everything else from a stormwater standpoint, we couldn't be we're thrilled. Everything it's above and beyond what we had hoped. Curious to see how the compaction of the lawn area, after each event, they're supposed to come in and remedy where the stages were set up and the movie screen. So we, making sure that that monitoring occurs, and we go out and we do the ground penetrometer to see what the compaction rates are, and making sure we stay on top of that. Aside from that, I think it's just fun watching stuff sort of grow now. It needs it, all landscapes when they're finished need a few years to grow in. But it's fun to see it. It's not static. It's a dynamic system that's just evolving and growing together. So yeah, so far so good on the monitoring.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful if everything that we designed the first time around was absolutely perfect. But I would say that rarely to never happens, because there's so many moving parts within a design, and there's so many things that happen that you can't foresee, because it is a dynamic space. It's not static, and so There's things that will happen 5 years from now that, even the university wasn't intending to occur on the site. And so there is that dynamic aspect. And so it's really great that you get to go back and are able to make the revisions as is needed. I think that's a really unique opportunity that unfortunately most landscape architects don't necessarily get that opportunity.
That's really it, is the adaptive management. That's, because as I said, these things aren't static, that they're evolving.
Right.
Change, the shade and sun exposure is going to change over time as stuff grows, and you may need to switch some things out. And yeah, just having that feedback loop, I think helps both design and more importantly, the management of our landscapes.
Mm-hmm. And essentially that gets back to really that idea of integrated research and natural resource management, where you have that feedback loop and you get the chance to analyze what was done, what's working, what's not working, through looking at the research, and then being able to modify things so that you're continuously improving the design or continuing to maintain the level of success that a current project is having. So the integrated research that your firm does, it really is taking and adding, having a natural resource manager in-house, which, is allowing you to do some of these things. And, I was wondering, what do you see for the profession in general? Do you see LA firms adding in natural resource managers and ecologists, or where do you sort of see this going?
Yeah, I think so. Emily McCoy, who's our director of integrative research, she's a landscape architect and an ecologist by training. And I think, historically our firm, Andropogon, has always had a mix of different disciplines. We have architects, we have landscape architects, planners, ecologists, horticulturists. We've always dabbled in we're most of our projects are water-based issues. Whether it's too much or too little, or the quality is an issue. And so I think it's important to have that sort of different group sort of cross section through those different disciplines at the table during design, most in the beginning and at the end, because I think it's a successful design really has to start with the initial thinking, but then the follow-up and the maintenance and management of that site is critical. So I think it's really important to have that sort of cross section of expertise involved with the projects. We have a pretty robust cross section of different disciplines in the office. From ecologists to horticulturists to architects to planners, landscape architects, obviously. I think I see, we've always been sort of built on that. Our founding 4 principles were sort of the same thing. Two planners, one ecologist, and we have an architect, and so I think each unique perspective of process and site dynamics, and it's important to have that mix of expertise at the table at the beginning of the project, and then more importantly at the end of the project on the follow-up and the post-occupancy maintenance, because each brings to it their expertise and some lessons learned to apply, or a different way of thinking, and it's a really fun dynamic. When you have all those people at the table, and somebody that may be looking at it from one lens, saying, well, it has to do this, that, and the other. It's like, well, how about this? And out of that comes the project usually, a well-vetted sort of a strong design that we know is going to work, and hopefully we could sell to the client, and then but there's always a learning process on every project. Each site has its own story. Each site has its own set of opportunities and constraints, and I think it's really important as designers to understand those and balance that with what the client wants to do and get out of the project. And I think we as landscape architects wear a very important hat in that we really are, or should be, leading these multidiscipline teams, because we are the bridge between all of them, I think, more so than any other profession. Traditionally it's always been the architects, the AE firms that have led these larger projects, but I think you're starting to see sort of this movement in these last 5-10 years of landscape really becoming the drivers of project, being the project lead, and that's not by an accident. I think that's more and more people are starting to understand how integrated design really should work, and how important site, understanding a site and orchestrating how a site is programmed and designed is something that's critical. And that's how these projects happen, is when it's analyzed and understood in the beginning, and then you move forward from that point. It's a shame when you get brought in, and you always do. There's always different projects, right? You get brought in, you're dealing with the leftover spaces, right?
Yep.
So, but hopefully the trend may long continue that we're sort of brought in the very beginning, even more importantly at the feasibility study stage of a project, where we could really look at a few sites that they may be considering for a project, and be able to really do our analysis work, which is a really key component to how we design, and be able to explain to a client that, hey, this site is great for X, Y, and Z, but here are limitations, or here's your development footprint. And because at the end of the day, it's really about curb appeal and saving money for them, right? Most of the time, you do get unique clients that really get what we do, and they're environmentally sound, and they want to demonstrate all these best management practices and sustainable design techniques. But the good portion are it's a performance-based design that we bridge to both worlds. That balance of the natural and the man-made.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of times it seems that, landscape architects many times are essentially the low man on the totem pole. But it does. I have seen that it appears that, that is changing, and that we are becoming the sort of the central hub that, bridges together other professions for projects. And it seems a lot of that is, being driven by some international projects where, budget is not necessarily, the huge concern. That a lot of times, really one of the driving forces or the driving constraints on some of those projects are environmental based, or there's really intense programming that's required. And so it seems that overseas, especially in the Middle East, there's a lot of projects that are maybe not being headed by landscape architects, but they're definitely in there from the beginning meetings on the project, and they're definitely essentially driving a lot of the design of how the project evolves as well. So your firm has also been doing some work internationally within, the Middle East. You've got you've done a project in Abu Dhabi that's a mixed-use eco park that has a 5-star hotel, some cabins. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, there's some cabins. It's a mixed-use development. It's situated on the coast where it used to have a mangrove community, and so I think it has a sustainability center that is going to. One of the main drivers of the design was to recreate this mangrove community and really sort of celebrate the native ecology there, and have this science center that allows for students and visitors to learn about the natural environment. And so the project's sort of typical international project. It's all hands on deck for a couple months, and then it goes through a very long waiting period for phasing and funding, and so that's sort of where that's at. But as I said earlier on the Shoemaker project, we usually get brought in for an issue with water, and that was one of the issues there. One was they didn't have enough water to deal with it unless they did some sort of desalinization of the ocean water there. And so understanding the sensitivity thrive on this very specific water level of this tidal water level. So that's sort of our role on that, is to sort of recreate that ecology and reestablish the mangrove community for this project.
focusing on the ecology, something that's fairly unique about your firm is the name of the firm. I mean, most landscape architecture firms, they use the last name of the principals or the founders, or initials of the founders, but Andropogon doesn't. So can you tell us a little bit about where the name came from and what it means?
So Andropogon is a native grass. It's one of the first grasses that grows on a disturbed site. So it had a nice metaphor for our approach. Historically, we were an ecologically planning and design. Grass was a really big component of our work. So it's a nice metaphor. We purposely didn't. The founders didn't name the firm after any one of them because they want this to continue on for generations. And so it was consciously thought of at the time, and I commend them on that, to have something that it has some true meaning to our attitude and our core beliefs in landscape architecture and sustainable design practices. The industry has caught up with us since 1975, and so now we have to look for ways to sort of, I guess, push the envelope. But nobody wants to say that, here you rest on laurels and say that we've been doing this for 35 years. So we're looking ways, and research is one of them, to continue to the firm's evolution now moving forward. I think the other big change in our firm historically was we did a significant portion of botanical and arboretum work. We still have a pretty healthy portfolio of that work. Especially these last 5 years, we've seen an uptick in it, which is great because those clients are amazing, and those projects are really rewarding. But we also really refocused our efforts on the urban environment and the infill of the urban environment and how to reestablish or sort of our interpretation of natural systems and how we could focus on the urban environment, and we feel that's where we're really needed. So it's great to see this evolution of cities around the world that are realizing the importance of open space and understand that they just can't look pretty. They have to be performance-based. And that for us to sort of survive as a society, this has to be ingrained in our thinking and how we redesign our cities. And so so as I said, the last decade or so, we've really sort of refocused our efforts on that portion of the work.
One of the things that I think people may not consciously think about, within an urban environment is that, ecosystems don't just start and stop at the edge of cities. The area within a city is also, has an urban ecosystem, and there's actually, I believe it's the U.S. Forest Service. They have a Baltimore-based research area that essentially just focuses on urban ecosystems. And I actually heard that there were soil scientists in Central Park that were looking at the biodiversity of the soils within Central Park, and their findings were that it was just as diverse within Central Park as it was out in the middle of a forest, which I think is very interesting.
Amazing, and it's until those studies start happening and people really it's education, really, right? It's getting the word out and having people understand, no matter how small your project is, you're one of hundreds of thousands of projects in the urban environment, and then when you look at that as an aggregate overall, it makes a big difference, and every site has a portion to contribute to the larger whole, and I think that's usually the first step in when we are approached with a project, to conveying the importance of why a client should consider some of the elements that we propose. Is for that reason, that there's no site too small to contribute to the issues of a city.
I think a lot of times people, think that they have to have an area as large as Central Park, but really with Shoemaker, you've got 2.75 acres, right? And you're bringing together a community, you're capturing all of the water, and you're creating this essentially hub for where people can interact and relate, and you're connecting other green spaces together, that's going to have a long-term impact, not just environmentally, but also socially within the area. And so the sites, they really don't have to be big as Central Park to really create a huge impact. So one of the things, you mentioned with Shoemaker is, some design soils, and, that there's some technology involved. And, I think in general as a society, obviously technology is, becoming more and more integrated within our lives. And again, within the profession, I also see that as well, where, from, software advancing, where, when I first started in the profession, I was drafting on Mylar, to now having these amazing advanced software programs, to knowing more. There's more science about the environment. There's more technology that can be put in designs. There's more. And at some point, there's only so much one landscape architecture brain can hold. And so I was wondering kind of your thoughts on technology and, this idea of, landscape architects needing to know more. Do you see the profession sort of splitting off into specializations? Or, how do you see this playing out for the profession?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge because it seems like every year there's a new crop of students that come out with a new suite of software expertise that is very relevant. It's just it's always evolving. But as an owner of a business, it's tough for us to we got to figure out which makes the most sense for us as a firm, and what we could outsource versus what we have to know in-house. And so, from Andropogon's point of view, our big ones are some of the traditional, CAD and the Adobe Suite products, but we have a really heavy use of GIS software for our analysis work. Some civil 3D components, when we talk with different consultants, civil engineering consultants, it's important to be able to sort of share software and talk back and forth. We haven't gotten caught up in the BIM era yet, so Revit and the others, I don't see, at least in our work, it's not as important or required, and so we'd rather focus those efforts on additional licenses for GIS. And the 3D component has been something in the last 5-10 years that's really taken off. And so the use of 3D design work for us really helps us to see a project and study it as we look at the different elements, but also helps us to convey the ideas back and forth to our clients, as well as our consultants and other collaborators on a project. And so so we use Rhino for our 3D work, and whether we do full-blown sort of visual simulations, or if we just use the 3D view as a framework for a hand sketch, it's proven invaluable. Kind of makes you think of how'd you do it before, without 3D. But hand drawing is still very, very important and highly used here at the office, especially in the early phases. You got to sit around a table and sketch together and sort of vet through a couple different design solutions. And I think before you could do any of the other stuff. So yeah, software is very, very important, and it's cost prohibitive in a lot of ways, and it's very expensive. And so I think each firm is going to have to look at their workload and the type of work that they're doing and see what makes sense for them. But that is something that always has to be revisited each year and budgeted for, and it's an incurred cost that's here to stay, I think. That along with software updates and new licenses for different software and website redesign, it's the new cost of business.
So for those students who are either just graduated or going to be graduating soon and looking to maybe come and secure a position at a firm like yours, what do you look for beyond sort of the graphic skills and that sort of stuff?
Sure. Again, I think given the diversity of our office makeup, it's hard to sort of put it in one sort of mold, if you will. I think the real important thing for us is somebody, you sort of find your way here, at least to our office, through I think you have a set of values so we tend to have some folks that really care about the, and I'm not saying other firms don't either, but it seems to be people that really have a passion about sustainable design and really want to make a difference. And then others that are really tied to the sciences that have a sort of very strong foundation in understanding ecology and or construction or different elements, and all are important, as I said, to make a design successful. And then I think it's about just the initial meeting and sort of the personalities. They're really important. These are people you work with every day and do a lot of traveling with, and the office environment is very important to us to make sure that we have a core group of people that really get along and enjoy, obviously the work that we do, but also enjoy being around each other and are very interested in learning about other people from different backgrounds. It's a nice thing to have. It's a very dynamic group here, that come from all over the place, different backgrounds and religions and nationalities and experiences, and it just makes it it enriches the day-to-day. Here, we have this nice little cafe area where we all sit down and eat at lunch, and it's great. It's great to hear the different stories and what people are doing. And so I think we look for people that have the skill sets, right, but then also have that enjoy life.
Right. So to kind of wrap things up, tell us a little bit about what you really enjoy, what you love about landscape architecture, and if there were areas in the future that you see there being real focuses on in the profession that you would be drawn to, what sort of areas or what sort of specialties do you think that the profession is going to, and that you really enjoy about the profession?
I mean, my personal what I get out of the profession is I love being able to be presented with a site with problems and figuring out a design solution, and then watching that come to life and be built, and then sitting there and watching people walk through it and enjoy it, and doing things that you hadn't even envisioned, as they make it their own space. To me, that's one of the most rewarding things. Being able to walk through a project with my daughters and understand that hopefully this is something that they're going to be able to bring their kids to. And we as landscape architects, we design for really the future generations. It takes so long for the landscapes to evolve and become stable, and if you look at Olmsted as an example, I mean, Central Park functions as well today as it did back in the 1800s, and that's just a testament to the importance of landscape architecture and sort of that the long view that we have to take of our design spaces, and understand the needs of what the current project requires, but also making it flexible to be relevant in the future. I think the other thing I would like to see our firm really champion is that notion again that no site is too small, and that the systems-based approach to design is scalable, and it's scalable, and it could function at different budget price points too. And so while yes, Shoemaker Green had a very nice budget and we were able to use really high-end materials, we've done, if not many more projects on the other end of that budget that are just as functional and just as important. And so I think it's important as designers that we convey that idea and come up with solutions that work on all different levels and all different locations, and making sure that we make our clients understand that. Aside from that, I don't know. It's exciting because we're such a broad. Our profession is so broad and far-reaching, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. I think that's exciting for us. I really do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to thank you, Tom, for talking to us about Shoemaker Green and some of the things about where you see the profession going. And so, again, this is Tom with Andropogon, and you can find them on andropogon.com. The links will be provided below this video, and check out what they're up to. Check out some of their other projects that they have been involved with, and if you want to find out more about ISDM, you can check out the website worldisdm.com. And again, my name's Carrie Moore with worldisdm.com. Thanks, Tom.
Great. Thank you.